direct involvement with.
Okay.
I mean, anybody, I could say things about them, but I can't say it firsthand about I saw them do this or I knew so-and-so and that sort of thing.
Okay. And the integration with Grady, is that something you want to talk about?
The hospital? I don't have a,
Some of the students led sit-ins that, helped get to the place where talks began.
see, the heart of that student movement was like 61 to 63, was it not? I mean, there were things that continued after that. And so I knew Ruby Doris, and Julian Bond, and of course worked with Carolyn Longbanks for years later on. But I was not in Atlanta in the heat, in the heart of that, right.
Okay. Okay. Well, let's just start with an introduction and give us your name and your titles and your background, how you came to Atlanta.
So we rolling?
Yes, ma'am. You're looking directly at Patrice.
I'm Nan Orock. I'm a senator in downtown Atlanta neighborhood district, and I served in the House for 10 terms. I'm finishing my 5th term in the Senate now, and I stepped into the March on Washington in 1963 and began a lifelong learning journey, and my activism really stems from my involvement that day in the march and how my life was touched and my understanding was broadened and my perspective and grasp of the civil rights movement, its scale, its scope, its importance, its significance, and the people within it, the individuals, all of that touched my life that day with a new sense of urgency. It had been something that was I was very much removed from, and from that day on, I connected with it and spent a lot of years actually in civil rights work. That led me to go back to my campus in Virginia, Mary Washington College, and work to engage students there in being involved in supporting the needs of the black community in Fredericksburg, Virginia, and educating ourselves and reaching out and educating other students and connecting with activist students on other campuses. So I was at an all-white girls' school, state school, and I believe it was my senior year before we had a full-time black female student enrolled. And I started there in the fall of '61 and graduated in the spring of '65. It was the it was really through the Race Relations Committee on campus that was sponsored by the YWCA, the Young Women's Christian Association, that I found a place for activism as a student. And the Y then and now continues to have a priority emphasis on eliminating racism. And they were one of the few voices of moderation on a white Southern campus, particularly on the female campuses in the South. And the Y brought us to Atlanta. Now, my daddy was raised in South Georgia, Mitchell County, was son of a sharecropper, 12 children, and very, very much a Georgian. That was on my father's side, and my mother was from rural East Tennessee, and then we were raised in Virginia. So coming back to Georgia for civil rights work was a really different homecoming than back to the family that had raised my father. So we came down on spring weekend of '64, Easter weekend, and the group of students that I was with went to Ebenezer, and Dr. King was there, actually talking to a class in a Sunday school room about nonviolence, and we met the SNCC workers that weekend. We were trained in voter registration and actually knocked on doors in Buttermilk Bottom and asking people to register to vote. And that was a neighborhood, really without even paved streets down in the heart of downtown Atlanta, called Buttermilk Bottom because when you had a heavy rainstorm, it was a soupy, flooded area kind of tinted by the Georgia red clay. And it's where the Civic Center is now. But little did I imagine that one day I would be asking people in those neighborhoods to vote for me decades later. So that weekend, again, was very important because I connected with SNCC and stayed in touch with them, and they sent all of their information up to us at Mary Washington, and I was able to disseminate things about SNCC's work to my fellow students, and then learned about the Mississippi Summer and came down to Georgia just as soon as I finished the school year. A classmate and I both came down to work for SNCC full-time for the summer as part of the Mississippi Summer Project. And I went to work for Julian Bond, who ran the communications department. And it was there that I learned about the Atlanta student movement and about the rich history of struggle right here in Atlanta, really spearheaded by students at the historic Black College gathering of, this is the largest, I believe it's the largest collection of Black higher education institutions in the world, and I was working under Julian in the communications office, and he had, of course, come out of that movement. And Ruby Doris Robinson was an activist in that movement that was, by the time I got here, she was running the SNCC office. And SNCC had been formed at the Shaw University a few years earlier. Yeah.
And yeah, the SNCC headquarters, the headquarters of SNCC will be a marker, and we're gonna put it right
Well, there's
across-
two. There's